So far away, Lucas, and lovely audience at home. Welcome to another episode of Wiki Weekends. I'm your host for this one, Karl Smallwood, and today we are doing an episode on a fan-requested topic, decided on by people who voted over on our Patreon. And today we're talking about what is, in my opinion, the scariest spooky movie villain. And that villain is simply Death from Final Destination.
Okay, yeah. That's maybe my favourite part of the Final Destination franchise, is I don't like how just, kind of quote-unquote like gore porn it became.
Yes.
I love the concept, though, that once you escape death is pissed off and comes after you.
And to clarify the topic of this video, when I say that, in my opinion, remember it's opinion, please don't come at me for this one, that Death is the scariest villain in a horror movie, I don't mean that the Final Destination movies are the best or scariest movies. It's just that when you think about the premise of the Final Destination movies, the overarching villain, Death, is really, really, really frightening.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right, is that they don't necessarily personify death in the sense of there is a literal, skeleton in a fucking robe with a scythe.
No, that's it, yeah. It's not like Jason Voorhees, running around in, a hockey mask in the woods. You don't actually see Death, but Death is the antagonistic force of the entire series, and the way it's portrayed, the way it's characterised, is really fucking frightening, as we'll get to as we cover the wiki. But go on, Lucas, what's your thoughts on Death in Final Destination?
Yeah, I was going to say, they still characterise death, though. It is talked about not only as a concept, but as a force that is, pissed off and playing games with you.
The risk of cheating the plan, of disrespecting the design, could incite a fury that could terrorize even the Grim Reaper. And you don't even want to fuck with that, MacDaddy.
Death is an actual character in the Final Destination franchise, and the fact they characterise a thing you never see is actually kind of impressive when you think about it. But to put us all on the same page, specifically this Wikipedia page, let's go through the wiki on Death now, shall we? So, Death, otherwise known as the Grim Reaper, is the main antagonist of the Final Destination franchise. It is a cunning and active force that acts as an invisible, yet ominous presence that seeks to maintain balance between life and death by manipulating any aspect of the environment about in the Final Destination movies. That Death has a plan. Death is this primordial, just impossibly ancient force that has control over all aspects of reality, and it really doesn't like when its meticulously crafted plans for all human life get disrupted.
You can't cheat death. There are no escapes.
Bullshit.
And I also do quite like that, at least when people cheat death really likes to, make a show of them.
That's the thing, yeah, that's something we talked about in a previous video about the Final Destination franchise as a whole, and we'll get to that in a bit. But, to continue with the intro here, Death does this by programming the events of every person's lifespan. That's also a concept. If you watch the movies for the gore, or people falling down elevators and stuff, and the rude-goldberg-esque ways in which they die, it's very entertaining. But if you actually stop to think about the logic of the universe as established in those movies, it's actually kind of terrifying that you don't actually have any sense of free will. You are going to die, and there's no way to escape your predetermined death. And if you do somehow manage to escape it, one of the most ancient, unavoidable forces in the universe will personally have a vendetta against you until you die. And it will make sure that you die in the most horrific manner possible, for seemingly its own amusement.
Yeah, and it also, literally follows a pattern and starts getting progressively more annoyed, seemingly, if you, in the first movie, avoid its grasp for the second time.
Yes, or sometimes it does it just it teases you, which is something we can get to, because I really do like the characterization of Death, and I'll get to that in a moment. But however, should anyone ever deviate from what Death has planned for them, colloquially known as cheating death, which is, it's a concept in fiction that's existed for literal, centuries, if not millennia. The idea, it goes back to the age of mythology, right? Of, cheating, if not death, then the gods. Like cheating, like, the creators, people who have a plan for your life. It's like, no. I outthunk the gods, and only the gods, or, the primordial force of the universe, do not take kindly to being cheated by mere lowly mortals.
Remember, at the instant you finish it, I own your soul for...
Well, hey, wait. If I don't finish this last bite, you don't get my soul, do you?
Technically, no, but...
I'm smarter than the devil! I'm smarter than the devil!
You are not smarter than me! I'll see you in hell yet, Homer Simpson!
I think one of my favourite pop culture moments of a kind of cheating death scene is the one in Pulp Fiction where he just fires point blank at this guy and every bullet misses.
Yep.
Die, you motherfucker!
And he just stands there and he just has a moment of religious conversion. It's like, well, God's own hand intervene and move the bullet out of the way because there's no other way to explain it. So maybe the guy was just a shit shot.
Yeah, more than likely, yeah, but obviously I can't remember the character's name, but he then takes it as because I've been reading this religious scripture, God stepped in and saved me.
We should be fucking dead, man.
I know, we was lucky.
No. That shit wasn't love.
Yeah, maybe.
This was divine intervention. You know what divine intervention is?
He mentions here that the entity known as death will seek to reclaim those who are not meant to be alive, but specifically in the order they were originally meant to die to stick to its original plan. The existence of death and the idea of death design in the Final Destination universe implies that there is no such thing as free will, with everyone merely moving along a path pre-planned for them from the moment of their birth. For some, that is a long life. For others, a short one. And that's why you have one of the scariest bits of the films. I recently rewatched I think 4 movies in the franchise where I got bored. Is there's the bit where the guy's this is explained to him death wants you to die, and that's it. And the guy's like, well, no, fuck you, I'm the master of my own destiny. And he pulls out a gun, and he pulls the trigger, and he pulls the trigger 4 more times, and someone takes the gun off him. They look and go, it's full of bullets. Because what are the odds of a misfire? Well, pretty rare. What are the odds of 6 misfires in a row? Almost impossible. The fact the guy tries to kill himself and does no.
Hang on, I ain't done with you yet.
Which is terrifying to think about, right? That you can't even be in charge of your own. You can't even choose when to die. You can't even do the fuck you didn't win to death. Death's no, it will intervene and just manipulate fate itself, luck, reality, physics, the world in which you live to stop you from dying when it says that you die.
Yeah, and then obviously I presume we're talking spoilers about the Final Destination series.
Everyone dies. Literally, everyone dies.
But then it's one of the characters that survives from the first movie, don't they then come back in a different movie and come out of isolation and get killed off?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's always that thing of you never really know what death's plan is because it's this primordial unknowable force. You can't know its intentions, and with that it wants to kill you, but you don't know why. And that's the thing as well, you never explain why you're predetermined to die at that point. Mentions here, Flight 180. There's a bunch of young people on that flight. Why are these young people meant to die? Because death said that they had to. It doesn't need to explain itself, just that you were meant to die, and there's nothing you can do. You can't reason with death. You can't reason with fate. You can't argue against fate. And
the one thing that I am not very aware of is whether they continue to follow the same rule of it'll kill you in order of when you were meant to die.
Yes, which it mentions here. So to accomplish its design, death itself comes in the form of what makes it look like freak accidents to anyone not on the list, is to prevent them knowing of its existence and not have any future incidents. Although the amount of time it takes to start reclaiming victims after their intended demise is never consistent, ranging from months to simply days. Which I don't think is inconsistency. It's death is, as mentioned, a primordial entity that has existed since the beginning of time. What's the difference between a few days and a few months when you've existed for millions of years?
Yeah, that's fair. to death, that's almost the exact same length of time, right?
Yep. Death itself also implies that the survivors escaping their intended plan is actually making future incidents worse and worse the longer that they survive. Not just for themselves, but for others too. Ooh, I dropped a pen, sorry.
Tell me who was sitting next to you on the roller coaster. Oh my God, are you right? Listen to me, you have to tell me who was sitting next to you on the roller coaster. Who? She's next.
And that's the thing as well of like the longer you try and like cheat death, the worse your eventual death is going to be. And that's why some people get real bad in the Final Destination universe, because they repeatedly cheat and mock death.
And that's the thing, right, is I like to think that that's because death is taking it personally at that point.
We do say here that death is not a malicious entity, but is instead merely one that seeks to tie up the checks and balances that control the world.
If that were true, though, it wouldn't be these elaborate deaths. It'd just be like, oh no, they slipped and broke the neck.
And my reading of that has always been that because death is this entity that has existed for millions and millions of years, it has infinite time to plan. And it sees people surviving as a curiosity. And just the fact that, well, I have control over all life in the universe and all existence, like, bends to my will. Death could just make you get hit by a car. Like, do you know when people survive, like, the flight 180? Death realistically could have just made like the brake lines, like, you know, fail on the bus they got away from the airport and kill them all that way. But because it's existed for so many years and it has basically infinite time to plan, it just does it as a challenge to itself.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of one of my favourite things about Death Note is that Death Note, the manga/anime, like the reason why the events of that kick off is because Ryuk is just stuck in all of eternity, bored, and is like, you guys are all fucking boring, I want some fun, and just drops the Death Note into the human world to see what happens.
Yeah, that's how I've always read death. Of like the fact that it usually kills people in ironic ways as well. It's like its death has a wry sense of humour because it so seldom gets to actively, like, you know, deal with humanity. Normally its plan just goes through to the letter, so on these rare occasions where it gets to physically interact with the world, by its own machinations, it chooses to do so in a way that would be interesting, at least to itself. Well, that's how I've read it anyway. Like the fact that, you know, people die in ironic ways, of like, just death has a sense of humour, because it's so bored of everything always going to plan. When something doesn't go to plan, it's something new. It's that thing, isn't it, of when you can see the future. Of like, there's I forget which film it was I watched now. It was I think it's like a Nick Cage film. It's not very good, but it's a Nick Cage film where he can see the future. And he talks about how his life is the worst hell imaginable because he's never surprised. And every conversation he ever has with a person is like torture because he's got to sit there and have a conversation that he knows the end result of, but he still has to go through the motions. Or like Heimdall, doing like God of War Ragnarok, where he can see the future and you try and talk to him and he's just pissed off all the time because he knows how the conversation's going to end.
Although I suppose it depends on how the power set works, right? Because like Heimdall, for example, can see your intentions at all times.
But even like that's basically precognition to him. And he talks about it being boring. I imagine it's the same thing for death of the moment something happens that it didn't expect, it's new. And how seldom would death ever experience anything new while it doesn't go to plan?
And why is it always teenagers that are the ones that are getting away from it?
So, the appearance of death. In the Final Destination series, death comes in the form of overly complex freak accidents to kill off survivors of major disasters that were originally supposed to die, usually in the order that they would have died in said disaster. If someone intervenes in a person's death, then death will cheat by skipping that person before moving on to the next. And that's the idea of, like, you can cheat death a second time, but normally doing that results in when death finally gets back to you, your death is going to be worse.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I really like about the original Final Destination movie is that they all go to, I think it's Paris, right? And they're like, oh man, we finally managed to definitely escape death for like the second time. And it's, oh, but what if the pattern just loops back round and then all of a sudden, like, at the very, very end is just Devon Sawa getting killed? And it's like, yep, you're not safe. You're never safe.
Alex proved that 3 times. On the plane, with me, with you. For all I know, it could circle back and get us all again. But I am the safest fucker in the world because you're still next.
Or the end of the 5th one, where they're all like, "Oh, we're fine. Death's not gonna get us," and they're getting onto the plane from the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, such a good way to, and ironically enough, it creates a loop. It creates the loop that, is alluded to throughout the series. Over seemingly all of reality will make implausible situations occur when someone deliberately tries to commit suicide, a la Eugene Dix when he tries to commit suicide with a fully loaded 6-shot revolver, only for every bullet to misfire, which is a statistical impossibility.
It might as well be impossible, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and he mentions here that usually there are mysterious clues as to how the next person will die. It is most common form being a brief gust of spontaneous wind. Other clues range from pictures or brief images or signs or an odd formation of something on the ground. And that, again, I read that as Death having a sense of humour of, you already cheated Death once by having this glimpse into the future. You had precognition of an event, or deja vu or something like that. You had an uneasy feeling that something bad was going to happen, and you cheated my design as a result. I think when Death gives people a clue about how they're going to die, it's testing them again. I'm going to kill you now, but I'm going to give you another clue. Can you do it a second time?
Bullshit. I mean, you can find death omens anywhere you want to. Coffee. Starts with a C and ends with an E. So does the word choke. So what, we're gonna choke to death?
Then you can just drop fucking dead.
Well, and again, going back to the whole boredom thing, part of me thinks, is it Death that's given them these precognitions in the first place to just let something interesting happen?
Maybe. We don't know. It's not really explained, and that's what makes Death in the Final Destination franchise so frightening to me. The idea that, like I said, this primordial knowable entity is bored, seemingly, and the fact as well it gives you a chance. And that's the thing that gets me, everyone who it kills has a chance. They have a chance.
You've always got a chance, but you've never got a full chance because it will keep coming after you.
It's basically you've got to just have that frame perfect reaction on the button press every time. And it's really, theoretically, you could survive every single time, but eventually you're going to miss that button press and die. And that's terrifying, right? You just got this thing gunning for you that you can never actively stop because it doesn't know how to stop.
And that's the thing, right, is it really a life worth living when you have to live in fear of death chasing you at all times?
At all times, yes, and that's one of the things that I think Death enjoys. Because obviously when people cheat Death, they get that sense of elation, right? That sense of oh man, I'm invincible and will live forever. I imagine the metaphysical concept of Death hates that and greatly enjoys the process of stripping someone's sense of elation away and replacing it with one of dread for their untimely demise. I said the guy who's I'm going to shoot myself in the head, and Death's no. You're not scared enough yet.
Yeah, exactly. The people further down the list, they don't get a way to cheat out of it. They don't get to kill themselves. They don't get to avoid death forever. Eventually it's coming, and that idea is even maybe more terrifying than being the first person on the list to get killed.
Yep, and it mentions that Death has a handful of servants who unintentionally, or in some cases on purpose, kill a person on Death's list. Additionally, Death does not appear to be above killing others to hasten its acquisition of survivors. Although that would suggest that they were also meant to die, and Death is just rearranging its plan on a whim to ensure they die at the same time as somebody else. And it says that Death is perfectly willing to sneak souls when the opportunity to do so arises, meaning it may be Death is subservient to an even greater, more powerful force. And as a result, that's why sometimes, or this is the explanation or theorization, that's why sometimes Death will avoid its usual, Rube-Goldberg-esque machinations to just hit someone with a car, for example, because it's getting to a point where it needs the souls.
Yeah. And, that's the thing. It's just, you've done a good job of cheating Death when it just has to kill you quickly, because again, seemingly, I know that realistically, the reason that Death has this sense of humor and this idea to make all these rude-goldberg-esque machines is because it's a movie. But when you take that for the lore of that universe, it makes for a really fun concept.
Yeah, as I said, I always read it as Death has a sense of humour, or a very wry, dark sense of humour. Like I said, there's one of the films where it's the racist guy who's in the process of putting a burning cross on a black guy's lawn. He accidentally
Right.
gets caught on the back of a chain of his car, gets dragged along the back of the car, set on fire, as his radio plays Why Can't We Be Friends? There's that thing of like, yeah, you know what? And Death's just looking at that of like, I have a sense of humour about this. Like, this is what the guy deserves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or like sometimes I think it's like the one with the hooks for the hands. Where it's like they see the premonition and it's like, I see a guy with hooks for hands and they call up the girl. He sees them, flips the fuck out and tries to run away. But with the act of running away, gets her hair caught in the prosthesis and then she gets her head stuck in the elevator and that kills her.
Right.
I also think that's Death, like, you know, it's going one step beyond. I'm like, the survivors are looking for clues to help them avoid the next attempt on their life, so I'm going to send a fake clue that's going to inadvertently cause them to run to their death inadvertently. Again, having a sense of humour or just seeing it as a challenge, because it's the first time it is able to interact with something. It does have a physical appearance, at least in some versions of the story. So, Death takes many forms, usually skulls, shadows, possessed objects that ultimately kill their victim. So when an object kills its victim, that is believed to be Death itself, taking control of that object to make it move in the unnatural way that it often does. But its most notable form, which the novel Final Destination looks could kill, was that of an elderly black man who wears a suit, has shiny white teeth, grey hair, and a cane with a skull on the end. Death adopts a form similar to this one in a dream Kate Shelley has in Final Destination End of the Line, implicating that it may be its preferred form when dealing directly with mortals. However, Death being depicted as a skeleton with a blacked cape and a scythe, the Grim Reaper is merely a stereotype which Death has not assumed the form of in the Final Destination universe.
I was not aware that in any other universe it had ever appeared in physical form, yeah.
There was a theory that it's William Bloodsworth. There's a theory that he is Death itself, and I don't buy that theory. I believe that he is like an angel.
Death. There are no accidents, no coincidences, no mishaps, and no escapes.
I don't know who William Bloodsworth is.
He's the black dude, the coroner who's in all the movies.
No harm, no foul. I'll see you soon.
And I've always believed that he's just an angel who, like Death, is just sticking to the plan. But like Death, you know, slightly putting their thumb on the scale to, alter reality to suit its whims, to create the scenarios that result in people's death. Like Bloodsworth also puts his thumb on the scale to give people at least a fighting chance.
Right, yeah, fair. Because the thing is, even if you were like an angel, for example, in most versions of these understandings of these, characterized forces, is that no one would be able to stop death is a thing that is necessary in the universe.
Who are you? Ted. It's the Grim Reaper, dude. Oh. How's it hanging, Death?
And when it comes to representations of Death as a character in fiction, I'm a big fan of the fact that Death is just it's just a job.
Yeah.
Someone's got to do it. It's a very thankless job, because no one likes to die. But I think it's a poem, where someone talks about how everyone always thinks that, the Grim Reaper is scary because they appear to you as you're dying and lead you to, the afterlife. But wouldn't it be scary to have to do that alone?
Vem är du?
Jag är döden.
Kommer du för att hämta mig?
Jag har redan länge gått vid din sida.
Det vet jag.
Är du beredd?
Min kropp är rädd. Inte jag själv.
I've always liked that interpretation of it's just a job. I don't take any pleasure in doing it, but someone's got to do it. And
I also do enjoy the adaptations where it's not one death. It is literally a bunch of people doing an office job.
Oh yeah, when Hell or the Afterlife is like Hades and stuff. It's paperwork and bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm. Like, there's a few different things that I've seen before where it's just, oh, there's like hundreds of Grim Reapers that are all going out and about. It's all just people doing an office job, and they're all just, doing a day's work.
It was like, The Good Place, that right? That's like the concept of that show. Of just the afterlife is just this endless bureaucracy. And it's like, always takes fucking thousands and thousands of years to get anything done. It's like, have you any idea how long reality and existence has been? 1,000 years is not that long in the grand scheme of things.
All the attempts you made to torture us. We must have been in the afterlife for 100 years.
Almost 300, actually.
Well, how is it possible that all these things happened to us, but no time passed on Earth? Did you go back in time to save us?
I didn't have to.
And it does mention here that Death's true form may be, at least according to a dream had by Jessica Golden and Macy in Final Destination Dead Reckoning, may be a massive abomination composed of decaying, shifting corpses and bones from thousands upon thousands of species. Not all terrestrial. Ooh, aliens in the Final Destination universe. In Final Destination Spring Break, however, Death can be seen as a giant cloud of smoke. In the Final Destination film series, however, Death is never physically shown, but its presence is known when there's a sudden gust of wind or a large, ominous shadow.
See, yeah, because you keep mentioning all these other things, and I'm not really familiar with anything Final Destination that isn't the movies.
Yeah, the novels and stuff probably go a bit crazy on it, but we mentioned that Death can be defeated. Despite being ruthless in its intent on killing anyone who cheats its design, Death is not perfect in its plans and can be defeated. Anyone who survives its intended disasters and cheats, it always searches for a way to cheat it completely, but almost always fail. However, there are ways to defeat Death depending on the perspective you have on its plan. One is new life. By far the most effective strategy and is achieved by having a survivor reproduce. Death cannot kill people, i.e. Their offspring that had never existed in its original design. Fortunately, this mercy also extends to their parents. This can also extend to people who were resurrected from death to begin a new life. So, for example, like, dying on the operating table and being brought back to life.
So is that saying, like, if you have a kid, then you cheat Death?
Yes, because you've created a new life that was not originally present in Death's plan. Because obviously you surviving was not part of the plan. If you go and reproduce, you've now created a new life. So basically, just as soon as you cheat Death, get your fuck on.
Yeah, apparently.
The other way, though, Lucas, is to steal another's lifespan. In Final Destination 5, it is revealed by William Bloodsworth that if someone who cheated Death kills someone who themselves is not meant to die, they will receive that person's unlived lifespan and be made safe, essentially swapping places with that person and taking their place among the living. This strategy is likewise very effective as long as the deceased person had a relatively long lifespan to live, remaining. However, Death still kills the survivor in the same brutal manner once the stolen lifespan is complete. And that's where you get the end of that film where, like, Nathan Sears, he kills a guy, and they're at the funeral, and yeah, it's kind of wild that he died, because the doctors were really confused. Like, what do you mean? It's like, well...
Turns out Roy had an enlarged blood vessel in his brain so big, he's about to burst. They said he'd be dead any day now.
Oh. And then he just explodes. Oh, no!
Like... That's the thing, they're lucky in that universe that more people have not figured that out, because people would just be going on mass killing sprees all over the shop.
But only if you're meant to die in the first place. Because that's the thing, someone who goes on a killing spree might be part of Death's plan. But if you, you survived an event through, some fortuitous intervention, then killing someone gives you their life. But I don't know if it counts if you kill multiple people. Maybe. Maybe you could live forever. Dorian Gray it.
Like, that's the thing, is, like, if you just blew up a building, does that mean that you suddenly gain, like, hundreds of people's lives, potentially?
I don't know, it's not been explored in the movie
I'm not
yet.
Encouraging it, people, I'm not.
We don't live in Final Destination world, it's fine. And to end on, Lucas, let's just go through some trivia about Death in the Final Destination universe. So, series creator Jeffrey Reddick stated in an interview that in the first draft for the first movie, Death was intended to be shown for a brief moment near the end of the film. However, it was decided at the last second that the entity would not be fully seen, because, things are scarier when we don't know or fully understand what they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the fear of the unknown, right? It's like the most primal and guttural fear that we have.
Yeah, it's like the whole thing about the dark, isn't it? People aren't scared of the dark, they're scared of what might be in the dark. You're scared that you don't know what is out there. Likewise, people aren't scared of, open water. I have thalassophobia, fear of open water. It's not that I'm scared of physically being in a big pool of water. I'm scared that I don't know what else is in the big pool of water with me.
Well, and it's the same of being scared of death, right?
It's not like you're not scared. You're scared of the fact that you don't know what happens after you die. You're scared that you not know, like, you know, you might not know what to do, or you might be alone. You're scared that you can't have control over that, which is something they talk about in this series, isn't it? When that guy tries to shoot himself, it's like, well, I am in charge of my own destiny. I refuse to believe I don't have free will. I refuse to believe that my death is predetermined. Bang. And then just like the gun doesn't go off, which must be terrifying, right?
That would be so scary at that point when you decided, no, I do have free will. And then Death's like, no, you really don't.
Well, weirdly enough, there's like an interesting way which is handled in the show Red Dwarf, which is a comedy of all things. And they encounter a being who is able to predict the future with near like perfect accuracy. And they talk about how, okay, so you're gonna die. You guys are gonna survive, but one of your teammates is going to die. And while they're thinking of a way to cheat death, they talk about the fact that, well, if we have got to survive, to, like, you know, if their vision of the future is entirely accurate, we cannot die for the next half an hour. Watch. And they just pull the trigger and they shoot a gun and it just misfires every single time. So they point it at the person that's like, it is going to die before they get there. And they decide, well, what about if we all just crowd around the person who is going to die? Because death can't kill us. Right? And I wonder if anyone in Final Destination would have thought of that. If we all just like huddle up in a group and move around as just like, you know, the orb, death has to kill is in order, and that's going to be really, really difficult.
Listen, what's that for?
I'm going out like I came in, screaming and kicking.
You can't whack death on the head.
If he comes near me, I'm going to rip his nipples off.
Well, I think a lot of the time in Final Destination, if I'm remembering rightly, that most of the crew need to die before the last couple of people really believe what's happening.
Usually, yeah. Like, you just want the orb,
A
right?
lot of it is just a bunch of teenagers going, I don't believe this is bullshit, and then dying immediately after saying that.
Then we have here some just one last bit of trivia here. Contrary to many cultural portrayals of death as a truly amoral force, like, you know, just doing their job, death in Final Destination is far more villainous, since its punishments involve excessive cruelty. In fact, its modus operandi is comparable to that of other slasher villains. So examples here are, death also makes it difficult for other people, including its servants, to save intended victims. For example, the old man struggled and ultimately failed to save Nora Carpenter from being decapitated, even though he unintentionally caused her predicament in the first place. Like, he's the guy with, like, the hooks. Death made him an unwitting servant of, like, I'm going to send a sign that a man with hooks is going to kill you, send that guy into the elevator, and then that dude is now responsible for a death that he never intended to cause because death decided to use him for part of his plan. Making him like an unwitting servant of, like, you know, this antagonistic force, like making him an accessory to murder, to death, without his knowledge, because fuck him.
It would be interesting to kind of like theorize how many other, as you say, like slasher villains and stuff would be defeated immediately by death in the Final Destination franchise, because a lot of slasher villain origins are like coming back from the dead, right?
Well, I think it's like Mugen, like the fighting game where you can put any character in it. Like, Final Destination is in that game, and it's just a stage, I think. And it's just, you have to survive for as long as you can, and then you win. But anyway, so you mentioned in the Final Destination 3 novelization, Wendy notices that death always seems to kill people right in front of her, simply to make her witness it all. So you just... And it's always like, that's the thing as well, when someone realizes, oh no, this person's going to die, I need to go help them. Normally it's like, just as they're about to get there to warn them, is when they die. Because death just, you know, a sadistic, cruel sense of humour.
As I say, like, all the other option is just, oh, well, we went there, warned them that they were going to die, and they laughed it off and then immediately got killed.
Yep. Or the warning is what kills them in the first place. Like, you know, a guy with hooks is going to kill you, to make you feel guilty for that person's death, even though, as the series establishes, death was always going to claim them in the end anyway. He also mentioned here that its presence drives others to murder, such as Peter Friedkin, who tried to kill people to steal their lifespans. However, death seemingly intervened to only make survivors kill people who were already on its list. Like the guy who's like, he kills someone who has a brain clot, or a blood clot in his brain. So he was going to die like a minute later, anyway, to give him that little bit of false hope. And then just snatch it away. Despite presenting itself as a moral force of nature, death sometimes covers its tracks to prevent blame, like with Todd Wagner's death. It also willingly causes collateral damage when targeting one victim. For example, massacring all the passengers on Flight 180 to specifically kill Sam Lawton. And that's like, you know, when And that means like potentially that plane crash was caused by Death trying to catch the people in Final Destination 5 who already cheated it multiple times. But then, which also leads to an interesting theory that, okay, so Final Destination 5, people cheat Death. They cheat it multiple times, and then Death causes a plane crash. Like, fuck it. Put them in a situation where they can't possibly survive. A plane crash, everyone's going to die. But then people get a premonition of that plane crash. So now Death has to fix that problem. And it's like that thing, like trying to patch holes, right? In a ship. And every time you patch one, 2 more spring up.
I mean, that is true, yeah. And I do like the idea of the ending of the Final Destination. However, the one thing I would say is if you just spent an entire movie's worth of time trying to avoid death, you get on a plane and some kid's freaking out that everyone's going to die, you would probably get off the plane.
That is a huge plot hole that those people don't hear that, freak the fuck out, and also get off the plane.
And obviously it's because they're retroactively trying to retcon them into the first film.
But if you're being realistic, if you saw people freaking the fuck out, screaming we're all gonna die, and you'd experience the events of Final Destination 5, you get the fuck off the plane too, and tell the people, you're 100% right, look the fuck out.
Fucking plane's gonna explode! Shut up, Brownie.
You're so not funny.
This is your idea of a joke. It's not a joke! It's not a joke! Alex, take it easy. It's not a joke. Sit down, Brownie. It's going down! We will remove you from this aircraft and I'll with you.
Well, it's like, they retroactively added that feature. But it's interesting that Death may have accidentally caused ripples in its own plan by trying to cheat its own plan. So rather than like just specifically killing the people it had to kill, it tried to kill them as part of like a mass explosion, which caused even more people to escape.
And then you could kind of extrapolate that and say maybe the reason why people cheat Death every time is because Death's cheating its own plan.
Which he does mention here that Death is somewhat hypocritical because it is willing, seemingly, to break the laws of nature, reality, and physics, despite being intolerant of those who would violate its supposedly immutable design. For example, killing one character by having a bus seemingly teleport through a barricade.
Oh.
Which I think is just the special effects weren't finished for that scene, and they just say, no, Death made the bus teleport and kill him. I will not let this plane crash be the most important thing in my life! God! I'm moving on, Carter. And if you want to waste your life beating the shit out of Alex every time you see him, then you can just drop fucking dead.
But either way, yeah, that's why I think Death is like one of the scariest horror movie villains. I don't mean the Final Destination series is the scariest horror series. It's just that when you think about the idea of what the villain of that series is, that's really upsetting. Just the idea you don't have free will, and that if you were going to die, Death will, even if you manage to cheat Fate gets pissed off and then tracks you down and makes you like explode. I don't like that.
And then, yeah, the more you cheat it and try to work against its plan, the more it will screw you up.
Is that the thing? Like the longer you run away, the worse the beating's gonna get. And it's like, no, stop it. Yes, that's Final Destination's Death. Thank you to all the people who voted on our Patreon. If you'd like to help decide on the fan voter topic for next month, you can follow the links found below and vote there. Presumably, it'll be up within the week of this video going out. Yes.
Yeah.
Around. Keep an eye on it, and thank you everyone for watching. See you all next time.